here. Okay, so I think the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to um, set up a class for our present. Okay, so we're going to go down here and select class, and we're going to give this a name of present. Okay, and for those of you who aren't familiar with C sharp, right, this is going to be a very simple class or model. Um, but to create properties in C sharp, there's this shorthand. You can do prop and then you do tab, and it actually builds in kind of the structure for you. And so the first property we're going to want is an ID. And then we're going to want a string that is its name, or basically the name of this item inside of the application. And then we're going to want, let's see, we're going to want another string, which is a URL, because this is actually going to be the surprise in each present is a URL pointing to a Blazor tutorial or resource or something that can help you learn Blazor and get better at it. And the last thing I think we're going to need is a date. Yeah, date time and then date. Okay. And then we're going to save that. And we're going to go back over here and let's see. So the next thing I think we're going to do, and we could put it here, but I like having uh, a services folder. Um, so let's create a new folder called services. And inside of here, we're actually going to create our present repository, right? Um, and a repository is at least C sharp is a way for you to call in and either pull in some data you've already prepared or make a call to a SQL database, maybe do some processing, which you would typically do in an actual service if this were a larger application. Um, and then you send that data back to whatever called into it. So we're actually going to do another class. Let's see. Okay. And this one's going to be a present repository. But now that I think of it, I want to show you something else that's you typically do when you're building out um, reusable classes or C# components is you create an interface that your class then inherits from. And not to get too deep into this, but what that allows you to do is if for some reason you needed to use a different present repository or a different way of getting presents or a different way of showing them, you can actually swap them out. And because you were referencing the interface in the first place, nothing breaks, right? So they're interchangeable. So let's do an interface, and we're going to make this an I present repository. Okay. Now, inside of this, an interface doesn't manage states, or you don't have any methods or anything of that nature. This is more of a contract, so to speak. And so we know we're going to want two ways of getting the presents, right? So the first one is, let's see, you're going to want, I guess we're going to want an IEnumerable of present. So an IEnumerable is just a fancy way of saying a list in C sharp. Enumerables can be used for any number of things, but we're going to want to use an IEnumerable of present, and not present repository, present, and we're going to want it to go find it in data, and then we're going to name it, and it's going to be get presents. Okay. And then the other item we're going to want is we're going to want to get one present instead of all of them. So in this one, we're going to do present. We can spell it right. And then we're going to do get present. And in order for us to get one present, we actually need to pass in an identifier for that present. And in this case, we're going to be using the ID that we created on the present class. So we're going to click Save. We're going to go back to our present repository. And here we're going to actually inherit from my present repository or build off of it. And you'll see that as soon as we add it, it says, hey, you're missing some stuff. So we're going to implement that interface. So now we have get present and get presents. Okay. Because we're not going to be using a database, at least not in this video, I wrote up a list of presents, or a list of the days, and we're going to put that inside the constructor. Now, again, you have shorthand for constructor here. And a constructor in C# is basically kind of the initializer, right? When a class is created or instantiated, you're going to be going through the constructor first to basically build out data, or if we're using dependency injection, basically pump in connections, any number of things, right? So when present repository gets called, we want to be able to use a list of presents that we have created. So we're going to create a private property that's going to be a list. And again, like I said, a list is an enumerable. And we're going to look for present, and then we're going to go to presents. And then we're going to pull this in. So, and I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me type this, because this is a long list. But you'll see here, we're building a list of presents. And for each present, we're giving it an ID. And the name is basically how many days until Christmas. So, of course, you could change this to remaining days or whatever you wanted, right? The URL for right now is empty, because we're actually gonna do something that's a little dynamic with this, so that it's not the same URL on every day, or the same URL on specific days. And then the last item is the date associated with this present. And for that, we're creating a new date time with the year 2020, the month 12, and the day 1, 2, 3, and so on, right? Okay, so then the next thing we're going to want to do is we're actually going to want to go down here, and for these, we don't want them to throw an exception, right? We want to actually implement some logic here. So if we call into get present, we want to return the present that they're looking for. So we're going to return presents.get. Oh, no, not that presents, that presents. Okay. First or default. And first or default, or basically what you're seeing here is language integrated query. And it allows you to look at a data you're referencing. For instance, for us, it's presence. And you can do SQL-like stuff against it, along with other things. But you can do, wheres and selects. First or default is basically saying, I want you to look in presence and get me the first present, the first item, right? That where the ID matches the ID that's being passed in, the parameter that's being passed in, right? Okay, so great. And then we're going to want to get presents, which is actually right now is going to be much simpler. We're just going to return presents. Okay, not present, presents. Okay. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the index, because the index is where we want to actually pull in our list of presents, right? And So we're gonna remove this. We're gonna leave the page there because this is our default route, right? If something doesn't work, we're gonna pull it in here. So let's do this. We're going to do today is, and again, we're using inside, and this is similar in your CSHTML or Razor pages, but we're going to do an at date time, and we're going to get today, and then we're going to, we want it to long string. Yep, it's a long date string. Okay, and that's basically going to give us, today is Saturday, December 19th, 2020. Okay, and then we're going to do a UL. Yeah, let's do an unordered list. And inside of that, we're going to add this for each. And this for each allows us to iterate over a collection, right? As it shows right there. And we're going to be iterating over our presents collection. So we're going to, for each present in presents, okay, we're going to do a list item. So we're going to do an li, and inside of the li, let's just grab the name. So let's do at present dot name. But you see, it's not actually recognizing that presence exists or what presence is, right? And so this is where we're going to need to do a couple things. We're going to need to set up our code block, if I can find the right keys. And we're going to have to do a private IEnumerable presence. Okay. So now this red squiggly goes away, but we got one here. So let's go find presence. And right, we're having trouble finding it. And one of the reasons is your imports. Now, we could actually import the data folder or the present class inside of the data folder in the index if we wanted. But in larger applications, you're going to be using files, multiple files inside of your folder structure. And so this is where you can use the imports to have it go find data. And while we're at it, we're going to have it also pull in services, which is new. And we're going to save that. And let's go back to the index. See, and now it finds the present. Okay. And now the name is resolving as well. So we're doing name, and let's just do the date. Okay. And we're going to click save. And let's go back and see. This has been running the whole time. Let's see if it didn't like that. Okay. So there's a good reason why it didn't like that. Because there is nothing here, right? I created a private variable or field, but I'm not actually populating it with anything, right? So we want to pull in one of Blazor's built-in methods. So this one is, as you can see, we've got here on after render, on initialized, on parameter set. On initialized is very similar to that constructor inside of your class. So we want to use on initialized. And if we go look at the base file, which of course you can dig into at some point, or maybe we even may do a deep dive on this at some point in the future, but you're going to see everything that exists on this component base, which is used throughout Blazor, right? So we then want to populate presence, right, with the list from the present repository. And in order to do that, we're going to need to inject that present repository into this file. But if you remember what I said earlier, we actually don't want to reference the present repository directly. We want to reference the present repository if for some reason, the actual present repository we're using changes in the future. Okay, so we're going to do present repository, and then we're going to do get presence. So now this page is done. we're in a good state here, but this is still not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because we are using an interface. Um, C sharp or .NET needs to know um, what to connect that interface with, or when you make that call, which concrete implementation of this interface are you going to use. So we need to go into configure services, and we're going to add transient, and we're actually going to let's see, what's the so we're not going to do this. We're going to do I present repository, and we're going to have to let it find it. So using services, and we're going to tell it we want to use present repository as the concrete implementation of I present repository. Okay, so we've got that saved, and now we're going to do another .NET watch run. And for a lot of the stuff we're doing, you may not actually want to do a watch like this initial stuff, because this is a lot more of the back end stuff, so to speak. Um, but you'll see here that we have from 1 to 25 being listed out on this page. And again, like I said earlier, today is Saturday, December 19th, 2020. But because today is the 19th, we don't want to show you all 25 days, right? Because the whole point of an advent calendar is you get a new present every day. So let's go and update our repository. And here we're actually going to, instead of getting the whole list, we're going to do a where, like I suggested earlier. And we're going to look for the presents, or we're basically using anonymous, and I'm blanking on the term, an anonymous function to call in. And we're saying we want to look at the date for each present, and we want to be less than or equal to date time dot today, which is the 19th. So let's save this, and let's see if it updates and see if it removes. Okay, there we go. Good. So now we're just getting the items up till today. Okay. So let's see, what's the next step that we want to do. I think what we may need to go ahead and do now is create our present component. That would be a good next step. So we're going to want to, and it's not giving us the option for, oh, actually, because I need to do a folder. That was what I was going to do. Okay. So and different people handle this different ways, right? But for reusable components that I kind of look at as more like a class, I like to have a separate folder called components. And that's absolutely not required. Different people do it different ways. But then we're going to select Razor component, and we want this component to be our present. Let's see, item present. Let's just do, yeah, present item. And we're not going to need this, right? And because this is a reusable component, and this is not a component that you would route to directly, we don't add a page, right? A page is not necessary here. So let's see. So what we are going to do is, because this is actually going to hold the information that we're supplying when you select a present. Let's add a parameter here, and in Blazor, you have some different parameter types. But for us, we're just going to use the single parameter that is going to be passed into this component, or this object, however you want to look at it. And we're going to do another property, and this one's going to be a present, and it's going to be present. Okay. And so we know that we're going to be passing in a single present object into this item, right? So what do we want to display here? And I think what we want to display is the present name, which is basically how many days left till Christmas. And I think we're going to want to do the URL, right? Which we're going to call a Blazor resource. Um, and this is where we're going to use the nav link again, right? You can do a regular href or, an a link, but because we're going to be referencing part of the object, this is where nav link becomes really valuable, right? So we're actually going to use href, which is right on a regular link, but instead of just doing a path, right, like whatever, we're actually going to use the URL of the present, right? And you can use the normal attributes you would use on a link. If I can get my keys right. So we want this to open up in a new window. And then here we're going to use the URL as the text, right, that gets displayed on the link. Okay, so now we have our present component, our present item, right? And if we go back and look at this repository, we have the ID, the name, the date. What we don't have is the URL, right? And like I said, instead of just doing some static URLs that I plugged in here, I actually thought we could do a list that's dynamically pushed in when a present is created or populated. So we're going to go and we're going to add a new class. And this one we're just going to call resource. And inside of this, we're going to have an ID so that we can reference it. And we're going to have a URL, which will be pushed into the URL of the present. Okay. And so now that we have that resource, let's do another list here. And this is going to be a resource. And this is going to be resources. Okay. All right. And we're actually going to create this list of resources in the constructor as well. So we're going to put it right here. And I just went and picked a few URLs out on the internet. There are a bunch more out there, but I just did 10. And then, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to be able to call in to this list and select one of these items to then populate inside of each present, right? And because we don't want it just to grab the same item every time, or we don't want it to go through 1 through 10 and then 1 through 10 again, we're actually going to randomize this a little bit. So we're going to do, let's see, get resources. But you know what? We actually need to go in here and add it here first. Okay, so this is going to be a string get resource, and we don't need to pass in anything because it's just going to be a random. We're not selecting a specific one. We're selecting a random one, and it wants to be resource. Okay, and so here is where we're going to use something built into .NET, and that is to create a new random, right? Which isn't truly random, but it's probably as close as you're going to get. And we're going to do randomizer equals new random. Okay. And then we're going to want to specify which numbers inside of random are selectable. So we're going to do random number equals randomizer, not random, dot next. And you've got several options or overloads to push in parameters. But for us, we want it to be between 1 and 10, which is 1 is the min value and 10 is our max value. And then we want to return resources where, let's see, um, r dot id is equal to random number, because that random number is going to be different every time, because inside of the randomizer we're actually saying pick a number from 1 to 10 for this random number. So it's going to change, and this is where um, we could try to do first default, right? Um, but that's not going to work, because we're not going to return a resource. We want to return the URL from the resource. So let's do select, and then we're going to do R again, and we're going to r.url, because the URL is what we want, right? And now we're going to do first to default. Okay, and we're going to close that out. Okay, so now we've got our resources, and we've updated our repository. Let's see if this is still running. It's still doing its thing. Okay, so the next step I think we need to go do is we need to go back to our index, and instead of just showing you the name and the date, I think we're actually going to show you um, the a link into that present, right? Um, and I actually did a little CSS and imagery earlier, which we'll pull in. But so we're going to change this to a nav link. Okay, nav link, and we're going to do an href, and that equals. Okay, so in this case, we're going to do a couple of interesting things here, right? So we're doing the at again, but inside of here, we want to do a string that will be interpolated by C#. And what that means is you can have a combination of text as well as uh, object IDs or parameters, or even objects if you uh, feel so inclined. We have that, and then for this, we're going to want to do the ID. Okay, so let's see what we get here, because this should get replaced by, okay, just IDs.